people, the Starship and Roper off for another day of broadcast insolence, and Mr. Roper is in the studio with us, returning to his broadcast duties here in the afternoons on WLS. Thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks to everyone who sat in this chair while I was gone, including some of the homeless who come here at night. We have a program. I spent most of the last 10 days, Rokheim, gathering in various public squares around the world, jumping up and down and holding flags of countries I don't know how to pronounce their names in many cases, hoping to see a goal. So that's been fun.
And when you see a goal, it is like it's the greatest thing that ever happened.
Oh my God.
Because they're so rare.
It's as if they were able to stop the asteroid from striking the planet Earth. The running and the jumping and the shirt goes off, and there's a lot of guys in soccer who wear a lot of hair gel, or they have no hair whatsoever.
Right. It is the high and tight is back in soccer. Yeah.
And all the coaches dress like villains in a Liam Neeson movie.
True that. They fedora.
Like in the States, if you do that, that throat slashing gesture, you get suspended. There, it's considered a sign of goodwill. It's an amazing thing. I love the soccer.
There was a guy wrote an article today about how it's the sport of terrorism.
Oh my God!
And I'm like, no,
really?
That seems a little, kind of.
Cameroon does frighten me.
Yeah, that seems like it's overstating. It's overstating it. Yeah,
that's clearly cricket.
Yeah, clearly. But this is, it's just something that we in America don't get. It's okay. The rest of the world gets it. It's fine. There's things the rest of the world does not get that we get.
Hey, Grant Park looked like I thought the Blackhawks had won the Stanley Cup, actually.
There's a lot of people out there. And a lot of young American kids interested in it, but they're not really that interested in it.
Well, they are until they're 9.
Right.
Because it's the first sport they get to play, right, as kids.
And because of the World Cup, every 4 years, we have to think about stuff. We have to learn something. It's sort of like the Olympics. Every 4 years, you have to figure out what a figure skater is and a double axel and a camel toe is. And then or you care about some sprinter alternately every 4 years. So it is what it is. All right. A lot going on in the program today. Ron Majors, of course, is going to be here at 3 o'clock. Fastest growing game show in American radio history. News or Loser is going, and we can just keep changing the name of it to make it fastest growing. I
thought for sure it'd have a different name when I got back.
Remember the story of the woman at Duke who is turns out she's a porn star?
Yeah.
She's complaining that she has lost her financial aid there.
Wow.
There's a good reason she lost it too.
I'm just glad that financial's in front of that right now. God bless her.
Yeah.
Get tested.
And big arrest today in the Benghazi attacks. We'll go out to New York for ABC News coverage of that. And let's start here, though. We've been discussing this every afternoon right at the top of the show because it does seem to be the most pressing story on the planet at the moment for Americans. Iraq, back in the news. American service personnel, combat types, are going back over to Iraq. At least 275 to start. And Kenneth Pollack, senior fellow at the Sabin Center for Middle East Policy and the Brookings Institute, is on the Super Celebrity Hotline with us. And Mr. Pollack, Unthinkable is the name of his book, Iran, the Bomb, and American Strategy. Is it unthinkable? I'm sure when you were writing this book, maybe you saw this, Mr. Pollack, but is it unthinkable that the United States and Iran may get on the same page for at least a short period of time here when it comes to this ISIS group?
First, guys, thanks so much for having me back. Great to be back with you. And no, I don't think that it is unthinkable. It's going to be difficult, and we got to recognize that there's going to be some hurdles to be overcome. But the issue with Iran and the United States when it comes to Iraq is, on one hand, we share some really important interests, right? Neither of us wants to see Iraq just continue in this state of civil war. We both love to pull it out of the state of civil war, stabilize it somehow. The problem is that what we'd like to see Iraq do at that point and what Iran wants to see Iraq do at that point, they're probably going to be very different, right? We want to see Iraq become a pro-American democracy. The Iranians would like to see Iraq become a pro-Iraqi Shia-dominated state and may not be terribly interested in democracy in Iraq. So, we can look at it and say, I think there's a lot of room for the U.S. and Iran to cooperate right now in terms of trying to stabilize this place that is absolutely coming apart at the seams. But we got to recognize that our interests diverge very significantly after that, and that makes things real tricky.
But Ken, it sounds, of course, and as you know this, the American appetite is nil for American involvement because it's this vicious cycle. Stabilize, extract, stand off to the sideline, watch it all fall apart at the seams, go back in, stabilize, watch it fall apart at the seams again. It just seems like that's never going to end.
Yeah, I think there is an answer to that. And, for instance, we have done it successfully more recently in places like Bosnia. But, at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. I don't see any interest on the part of the American public, certainly not in putting in ground troops in Iraq. And it's going to take somebody's ground troops, ground forces to stabilize the situation. And again, that's why Iran is so attractive to the U.S. government right now, because let's face facts, the U.S. government really does not have very much influence with the Iraqi government right now, with Prime Minister Maliki and the people around him. The Iranians do. The Iranians have a lot of influence in Iraq. And so the basic feeling is, hey, why can't we try to leverage Iran's influence with Iraq for what we want to see happen anyway?
Okay, and honestly, I don't mean this to sound callous, because a lot of people have brought up the notion of Bosnia here, and we've done this in Bosnia, we were successful there. But Bosnia is a very, very different circumstance, right? It's in Europe's not only backyard, it's Europe. There's international forces that were all interested in stability there, and it's a relatively small footprint compared to what we're dealing with in Iraq. And the influences are very, very different here. So
that's certainly all true, and I really don't want to get into this fight because it's going to get into the kind of who lost Iraq nonsense, which I can't stand.
Right, but
my answer is everybody lost Iraq, Democrats, Republicans, everybody.
Okay, and I don't want to go down that road either. But I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that now at what point do we just have to say, listen, we did it, we tried our best, at the time it seemed like the right thing to do, and we did our best, and we lost 4,400 U.S. military personnel were lost there, and tens of thousands more came back with fewer body parts than they left. So it was a very, very, it was a very tough conflict for the United States, and a long conflict for the United States. The question is, at what point do we just cut and say, that's it, we're going to let this descend and come back on its own, and we'll figure it out later?
Yeah, well, I think we kind of did that in 2011. I think that's the truth of the matter. That's why we've got so little influence in Iraq today. And, I think that it's part of what the administration is struggling with, which is they kind of said, what, we really don't want to have anything to do with Iraq. We really are going to leave it to its own devices. Problem is it's now in a state of civil war, and they're kind of nervous about both the terrorism threat and the issue of oil, which of course will directly affect our economy. So the question becomes, all right, what can we do that isn't going to require a major commitment to Iraq? What can we do? And as I said, that's one of the reasons why they've come around to this idea, which again, I'm all in favor of trying to see if we can enlist the Iranians, if we can bring them over to our side, if we can help them to move Iraq in a direction that would be good and comfortable for us as well as for them. Because again, they've got the influence in Iraq right now, and they've got an interest in making an investment in Iraq and stabilizing it in a way that we really would prefer not to.
All right, Ken, hold on one second for us. 44 miles out of Baghdad is where this group is right now. How much of a threat to Baghdad is it? How can they actually occupy it? We'll get all those answers from Ken Pollack from the Brookings Institution and his recent book, Unthinkable, Iran, the Bomb, and American Strategy, right after this. Ken Pollack is with us. Currently, he's a senior fellow at the Sabin Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. He's got a book out called Unthinkable, Iran, the Bomb, and American Strategy. And he is in his former life, he served on the staff of the National Security Council in the mid-1990s and is in 1999 and 2001 served as director of Persian Gulf Affairs. So obviously, you've got a lot of experience with this, Ken. This is a part of the world, the Iraq situation is part of the world that you have studied and thought about and had to present, obviously, to the president a number of times about issues surrounding
this.
Much
like it any time I did.
Yeah, I mean, who would? But here we stand with this ISIS group 44 miles outside of Baghdad. They've taken Fallujah, which is essentially a suburb of Baghdad. And which is a place from which to mount an assault on Baghdad. But Baghdad is a city approximately the size of Chicago. It's got a couple million people in it. How can this group actually, it's one thing to occupy a village. How could they take it and occupy it?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And first of all, Chicago is a much nicer city than Baghdad.
Sometimes.
But Baghdad's bigger. It's 8-9 million people. Wow. It's huge, right? And you're absolutely right. I think that ISIS and actually all the other Sunni militant groups that are now allied with ISIS, I think they're going to have a very tough fight taking Baghdad. Let's remember, Mosul is a city about 1.7 million people. They only took half of Mosul, and they did it very much by surprise. Mosul is half Kurds. That's the half they didn't take. The other half is Sunni Arabs, right? People who didn't like the Maliki government to begin with. Baghdad is primarily Shia. And what we've seen is the government is regrouped. They have put their troops back out there, regroup them. They've got these vicious Shia militias out on the streets, integrated in with the Iraqi army units. They're now backed up by the Iranians. I think it's going to be a very, very difficult fight for the Sunni militants from here on out. And I'll put it this way, I will be surprised if they are able to conquer Baghdad and are able to push much beyond it. I think what we're looking at is kind of a very typical civil war kind of a situation where you get a horrifically bloody stalemate along the boundaries, the internal boundaries of where the ethnic or sectarian or other groups meet.
As a CIA analyst, you wrote the strategy and basically the postmortem for the Persian Gulf War. And as we'll all recall, George H.W. Bush chose not to go to Baghdad, right? I mean, that was a decision that was made because he realized he was going to create this, he was going to turn what had been a very successful short and for the United States, pretty bloodless experience into a potential meat grinder. Is that the mistake these guys could make?
Yeah, I think there's no question that these guys they can overextend themselves. Wait, actually, let me back up. When you say these guys, do you mean the Obama administration?
No, ISIS.
Do you mean ISIS?
ISIS. Yeah, okay. I mean these guys, ISIS.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suspect that Baghdad could prove to be biting off more than they could chew. Again, it's a huge city. It's a mostly Shia city. I think it's going to be really tough for them to do so. We think that they invaded with maybe a couple of thousand guys. They then linked up with another couple of thousand of their own personnel already in Iraq. They've been recruiting. They've got these other Sunni militias, but all told, it looks like they've got about 15 to 20,000 guys. It is going to be incredibly difficult for them to take and then hold a city of 8 or 9 billion people that, again, is overwhelmingly Shia, with those kind of numbers.
And let's face it, the United States, we have to look at what our side of this is too. It's the largest diplomatic facility in the world at Baghdad, right? The former Green Zone is now one gigantic embassy, essentially. And there are thousands upon thousands of employees who work there, whether they're intelligence people or they're actually diplomats or people working for the State Department or contractors who are there to secure the area. I mean, are we sending, is it your understanding that we're sending these 275 special forces, special operators in? We always say advisory role, but we never really mean it. Are they there just to back up those people to keep that facility safe?
That's my understanding. I mean, that's how they've announced it. They are talking about these guys as a 275 person increment to beef up security at the embassy and a couple of the other facilities that we've got in Baghdad. And, that's a reasonable thing to do, and that's a reasonable mission for 275 guys. And that said, you're getting at a good point, which is I think that we have to expect, in fact, I think we have to hope that there are other Americans in Iraq, right? We have to hope that there are CIA personnel and special forces guys who are in Iraq right now just checking things out, trying to figure out who's where, doing reconnaissance, hopefully targeting some of the worst ISIS commanders, some of the worst terrorists inside ISIS and the other groups. That is really important for us to do independent of anything else that goes on, because we should remember that, the intelligence community has been talking about the fact that ISIS and these other groups have started to think about mounting terrorist attacks against Americans. And so if they're going to have a big chunk of Iraq, whatever else is going on, we've got our own national interest in knowing what's going on out there and being able to do some independent operations simply to shut down their terrorist attacks.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Ken.
Thanks,
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Ken Pollack from the Brookings Institution and his book Unthinkable, Iran, the Bomb, and American Strategy. Coming up, a major figure, so says the United States government, in the Benghazi attack has been taken into custody as on a naval ship heading toward the United States or Guantanamo. Still unclear. What does all this mean? We'll find out right after this.